So begins one of the most wonderful, recognizable pieces ever. Anyone heard that before? Yeah. It's interesting for classical music because you hear pieces, William Tell overture, Ride of the Valkyries, things that just enter popular culture, and yet classical music as a whole, it's not necessarily one of the most listened to forms at all. This piece in particular, it's entered through cartoons, through rock music, and anyone who has seen or owns the soundtrack to Saturday Night Fever, the disco hit, A Fifth of Beethoven. I actually played in a disco band once, and we got to play that. It was pretty fun. I wore lots of polyester and everything. So contrary to the piece's legendary status, this piece actually had a really rocky beginning. It was premiered in 1808 on an all Beethoven concert that lasted 4 hours long. 4 hours. We could play a lot more music if you wanted to go to 4 hours, but I don't think that's going to be fun for anyone. Also in this concert, he had premieres of his 6th Symphony, his 4th Piano Concerto, his Great Mass in C minor, as well as many other pieces as well. And apparently for all this music, they only had one rehearsal for it, and legend has it that it just sounded terrible. That no one liked the music, the orchestra was unrehearsed, it just sounded bad. And I think one of the big things with the orchestra is no one quite understood what happened with this piece. Usually a piece starts out with a melody, something nice, and here it starts out with rum-bum-bum-bum. What in the world is this? So the musicians sort of rebelled. Yet it's because of that opening motif that this has become quite the piece that it is. There's so many interpretations of what Beethoven meant by this. There were dark times in Europe at the time, Napoleonic Wars were going on. Though one of the most personal thoughts is, and this is always the kicker with Beethoven that always never fails to amaze me, he was going deaf at the time. And quite well, he was near deaf or deaf at this point. So imagine writing a whole piece with being deaf, not being able to hear. Astounding to me. Also with this motif, it's in a way that he takes his forms of what he wants to use for the whole piece, and he takes those building blocks of 2 measures and makes an entire symphony out of it. And it's mainly the rhythm that happens. So we can describe this rhythm in a couple different ways. One is short, 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 long. Or if you want to use numbers, you can say 1, 2, 3, 1. Now, if anyone who knows Morse code at all, when Morse code was invented, they used the letter V, V Roman numeral for 5, Beethoven's 5th, and they gave that the code ... dash. That's how impressive the motif made it into the culture. So we're going to show you a few ways he uses this motif, this short, 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 long, and builds it into the entire symphony. So we just heard the opening bars, and we'll show you what happens after that when the theme comes in. See how many times you can count he uses this 1, 2, 3, 1, short, 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 long. A few. 2, 4, 40, something like that. So now at this point in the classical symphony, we've gone through our first theme, and it's expected to have a more lyrical, pretty theme, and he delivers. So we're going to hear a little bit of what he puts with that. there's a few instruments that we left out here, our cellos and basses, and I'm going to show you what happens when we put them back into the picture. So he's introduced the entire building blocks of what he's going to use for this entire first movement, the entire symphony. We go on to the second movement, which starts out with a beautiful viola and cello melody, and eventually comes on to a counter melody, though that uses the same four-note rhythmic motif, which we'll show you. Aren't they beautiful, by the way? Our violas and cellos working on that. Briefly, we'll show a little bit of the third movement, which goes back into the darker sort of character of the first movement. Once again, it starts out with a cello melody. It's followed by a counter melody that, once again, can you guess what it is? Short, 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 long. 1, 2, 3, 1. Very good. We're catching on. Go on in just a little bit. There's a happy dance section that you think, oh, we're getting happy again, but lo and behold, what happens in You can't let it go! Can't let it go! Can't let it go! Then, later on in this third movement, we've been through all this sorrow, all this darkness, our head banging against the wall, and one of the most truly magnificent things in the history of music happens. We come from this eerie, austere, just chord, one of the eeriest things you've ever heard, which is accompanied by the timpani going boom, 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 very dark. And out of that arises an amazing climax which leads directly from the third movement into the fourth, that played without a break. And finally, some people who are sitting back here who've been waiting, twiddling their thumbs for the whole concert up to this time, our trombones finally get to play for the first time. And he even saves one for just the very end, which we'll show you. We won't go all the way to the end because we've already spoiled too much, but just one more thing, you'll see how he does it. And then it goes on and on and on, happy ending for all. So I hope this was a little informative of what I think just makes this piece one of the greatest of all time. I certainly think the emotional quality behind it is enough, but the construction of it, for me, just boggles my mind the more times I look at it all. Thank you so much for coming to our concert tonight. It's a lovely evening outside, I know, and you're spending it here with us, which means the world to us. Thank you all for all your support throughout the season. We will be returning next season with concerts starting in the fall. Please check our website. Our listings in the papers, we will inform you when they are. Lastly, I want to thank the orchestra on stage for putting together this amazing piece. It's very challenging, and they've done a fantastic job. I really hope you enjoy Beethoven's Fifth Symphony.